Chronometry calibrated. The gateway will open in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Analyzing data. Likelihood of parallel universes now at 10%. Continuing analysis of the many worlds hypothesis.
I imagine that no matter what you tell me or tell yourself, you'll ultimately die listening to podcasts. So what I'm asking is this. Wouldn't you rather give it all at once to something real, rather than carve off useless pieces of your brain listening to Rogan? Welcome, everyone. I'm Gayfesh. Joining me, as always, is the lovely Moss.
Hello.
And DemonMama.
Hello!
And today we will be continuing our coverage of Andor with episodes 4 through 6, also known as the Aldani or Heist arc.
Woo!
Yeah. Moss, since you are the newbie to the show, what are your first thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like how to get radicalized into a political movement, right? Like we're starting out with just some dude who is like, now I've seen Rogue One this past week, so I'm caught up just for the reference of my co-hosts here. So I know like where we're going with this story eventually, but like where we've started is just some dude on a planet who seems to not really like authority very much, but also wants to keep his head down. And now he's been suckered into this thing. He's like, yeah, I want to make my money and then go. But then like, I think, this is the beginning of sort of a political education, which obviously I find very interesting since I am a politically oriented person. Just the dynamics of joining an insurgency, the natural level of defensiveness that comes with bringing someone into the fold whose motivations you don't know. That was like a pretty big central point of the first 2 episodes of this little trio here. And I love the concept of like, even for Nemec, using Cass's presence as a means of furthering his own political understanding of like the role of mercenaries in a rebellion. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to dig into in this episode, but overall, I totally get why you guys like this show so much. And it's very exciting to see like, okay, well, geez, we're halfway through now. Let's see what's going to happen over the next few episodes. And then there's a season 2, which I'm like, oh man, I didn't realize I was going to be excited about a show coming out this year, but it's going to be good.
Yeah, the trailer for season 2 actually literally dropped while we were recording the first episode. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited, and it looks like I don't think this is a spoiler for you because he's not in this season, but Ben Mendelsohn's character from Rogue One, he's going to be in season 2.
Okay.
So yeah, it looks like they're building up more toward, connecting it to Rogue One rather than here's a guy from Rogue One and here's him doing other things. Mm-hmm. Of course, other connections to Rogue One is we've got Mon Mothma finally, which I, didn't want to spoil, but when you brought up last episode, it's like, it's nice to just see like guys. There's no like senators going on. I'm just like, I can't say nothing.
Yeah. Preserve the spoilers.
I love what they decide to do with Mon Mothma. I'm very excited to see your reaction to all of this, Moss, because it's pretty interesting.
I feel so bad for her. Like, that's mainly how I feel about her right now. I'm like, man, she is just not catching a break anywhere. It sucks.
It's rough.
Her husband sucks. Her daughter hates her. She's, like, kind of like in terms of her political career, she is like just kind of like we see her give a speech and it is like the most like, okay, Hakeem Jeffries, let's take you down. But then on the side, she's financing a rebellion.
She has no political allies. Like that's the thing too in her position.
Yeah, that's where her real insurgency lies. Is funding the insurgency, but that's even coming into question because like she goes to Luthen and is just like she's like I want to bring someone else in and he's just like
no.
Which I think is funny because like he's like, no, we can't bring anyone else in. We're too vulnerable. I'm like, you literally just brought in Cassian, and there's
he brought him in a different way. She's talking about bringing someone in as like a part of the organizers of the thing. He brought in Cassian as like this is a guy we're having do a thing. It's like,
you can cut that distinction if you want, but there are so many moments like that in this arc where people are doing this dance of hypocrisy and contradiction where the means necessary to fight the Empire require using methods that built the Empire. There are lies and deception and authority being utilized to fight lies and deception and authority. There's all of this, like Luthen telling Vel, is like, you got to take Cassian or the deal's off, and you have to convince the team that it was your idea. And Vel is just, and like, when the people are like, oh, so we're just like supposed to you know, like trust this guy with our lives, and Vel's like, that's my call to make.
Yeah.
Which, like, I don't know that I would be okay with just being like, yeah, you know what, I will absolutely submit to you when you don't even seem like you are particularly sold on this guy either. So there's all of these little things, little ways where people are either segmenting off or like not paying attention to the hypocrisy. It's like, I don't know, like the dialectic would have a field day with this show, you know?
I don't know. I don't know if it's so much a matter of hypocrisy as it is a discussion of like what tactics, what actions are necessary to change the current state of things.
I should say, I don't say hypocrisy as a moral judgment.
Yeah.
I'm talking because, like, for a long time, I have often said that, like, hypocrisy is the first step on the way to real growth. You have to break away from your previous opinions and previous thought patterns and previous behaviors and do things that you might have condemned before to grow politically. When people who used to be like, say, homophobic are now, you know, championing gay rights, it's like, oh, well, you're a hypocrite because you, well, okay, well, that's good. That's the good kind of hypocrisy. I would like them to stop being homophobic and start supporting queer people, you know?
I think hypocrisy has this connotation of a disingenuous motion, like between belief systems, as opposed to like just simply naturally developing over time. But, you know, we're quibbling over specific definitions of the word now, but like, yeah, it is a contradiction sort of for one person to be like, yes, I'm in charge, listen to me. And then like, actually they're taking orders from somewhere else. And there's like an expectation that the other people not ask questions that she was just asking. So yeah, it's a little weird. It's not a good position for her to be in, right? Like Luthen put her in a hard position.
He did, but he also guaranteed that the thing was an actual success because they would have undeniably failed.
There was no way. They didn't even have a pilot. Like, oh man.
Yeah, I mean, they literally didn't know what they were going to be dealing with the transport. Like, he's like,
right, like, how would you calibrate the weight? And he's just like, he looks at them like, it's like, what the fuck do you mean? How do you calibrate the weight? There's like a little gauge right there. You didn't know that? What were you gonna do?
Yeah. It was wild too, because it's like, not only were they not prepared, like they had somebody who could fly a ship, but it was like, not only were they not prepared to actually fly that ship, but Cassian almost couldn't make it through the flight of the Eye. Like that required,
they needed a navigator,
like a co-pilot.
They needed exactly. And it was like, oh man, that was, they would have failed badly. And so like definitely the right call was made in bringing Cassian on. Something I wanted to talk about, I think, like, I love that this arc has like such a clear thesis statement when Nemec says like everyone has their own rebellion.
Yeah.
That is, like, in my opinion, it is the recurring theme of all three of these episodes. Is we see all of the different, extremely different reasons that people have found their way to this point. Everything from, and it's like, there's just so much, it like harps on this so much, down to like the Aldani people who come to the temple, and there's like, they're like super insistent on maintaining their ritual practice, even though they literally throw the like the fur that they get in the tray, they like throw it into the fire and spit on it. But that like, that all, first of all, that all serves.
Also, the Bryan Cranston character is just basically telling the Imperial guy, I hope you die, in a language that he doesn't understand.
Yeah, exactly. And like the other guy gets it and hears it. And it's like, but it's like, we see so many different characters who come from a completely different walk. Like, we literally see two separate formerly Imperial characters who have completely different approaches to the situation and where they're like finding their rebellion. But also, I won't spoil anything here, but there is a thematic through line that will become very important that I think is really relevant and is illustrated very strongly in these episodes that like plays into this idea of like everyone has their own rebellion, because we even see types of rebellion that like don't have good outcomes. You know what I mean? Like, for example, we see the beginnings of Mon Mothma's daughter, who is like extremely rebellious towards her, but is rebellious in the way of like, I despise like what you are, what you stand for. And like, she's like, meanwhile in like the Senate, like trying to stop a genocide. That's like the one thing we see her talking about. And like
and her
daughter
husband is inviting like the guys who are doing the genocides to dinner at her place.
How has she not murdered him in his sleep? I don't get it.
So there
that
is
guy's like, must everything be so boring and like that dude is the epitome of ignorance is bliss. He just wants to have a fun time. And gosh, you liberals are just such a buzzkill with all of your human rights talk and people getting killed. Can't we just, have some jokes and a laugh?
Yeah, let's eat some good food. Yeah, man.
Another person that we see engaged in a type of rebellion that doesn't necessarily have good outcomes, but is that nonetheless illustrates this idea that truly everyone has their own rebellion, that this rebellion is the idea that it's a natural state of like, it's a part of us. It's intrinsic to humanity, is this need to have some level of individuality. And some say is Deidre, who is like the ultimate Imperial. And even her, she's finding every single way that she can to circumvent the authority of her direct commanders, and also try and steal a job from another guy who's a higher rank than her. And like, it's in the name of being a better horrible fascist. But nonetheless, even she, like, she can't recognize it. You know what I mean? But even herself exhibits this natural rebelliousness, this desire to forge your own path and to break the rules as they are. I think it's interesting that we see, obviously, there's so much attention paid to, and rightfully so, to the characters who are fighting for a very good reason, but that we see that this idea that rebellion is like part of the human condition, which is like this thesis statement that Nemec puts forward. Like, I like that we see that across the spectrum, all the way down to even Cyril. Like Cyril's way of being like, he's fighting against terribly and failing, but he's fighting against what he sees as what is binding him. And literally, like, his uncle Harlow and his mom, just holy shit.
Oh, his mom is such a horrible person.
I like her a lot.
I do too. But like, you see her, you're like, oh, Cyril never had a chance, did he?
He never had a shot. He was doomed.
She has big like Italian mom energy. I don't know. Yeah. And that whole like, I'm gonna call in a favor, like and they're not even blood related to Uncle whoever, I don't think. So Uncle it's clearly Harlow. Like they just have some connections that she's calling in. So like, she's not a great character, but I do like her. I find her quite interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I love
him with his little photo
like,
of Casa. He's like just staring at this little hollow of Casa. He's like, I'm gonna get him someday.
Yeah. You cost a big company its contract in a RIM system and furthered Imperial direct control. The ISB guy goes and says, hey, congratulations for that. Thanks to you, the Empire is moving in.
In some ways, like, it was kind of better for the people there on Ferrix. Like, I'm interested to see if that comes back around later, but like, that the company has a hands-off policy for the most part of like, we don't really want to get involved. We mostly just want things to continue operating smoothly. And then for Imperial control to supersede that is like obviously less good for anybody who's directly involved. Yeah.
There's not much of Ferrix that we see in this arc, but like, we're not done with Ferrix.
No, not even close. Yeah.
Because the ISB guy was there and talking about, talking to the guy who wants to be a prefect and is like, here, take the hotel that we were told last arc should be like, is just like, it's a, they just gouged the visitors there. It was like, well, let's turn this into your new Imperial headquarters.
Yeah. And I saw an interesting connection point. Because that guy says, can I please be promoted to prefect? I know there's no additional pay. It's just for the title. And then in some other moment, we hear that a prefect was in charge of flooding, or maybe was that a story that he made up? Was that the guy who was like lying about having a brother?
Yeah.
Okay, so that story wasn't even true. But if you take it face value, I was like, oh, so a guy who doesn't even really have a good rank is just performatively like messing up somebody's stuff. But yeah, he was lying.
Well, also, I mean, yes, Skeen was lying, but like he probably took that story from somewhere. He probably took someone else's story and
Kernel of
made it.
truth twisted into something. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because like, Skeen was he was in and out of the prison system like Cassian. That's what they were talking about, comparing their tats. And so like, Skeen's been around, he knows people, he's seen a lot of people hurt by the Empire. So I'm sure he heard somebody who's like, yeah, my brother just they just fucking killed my brother, and he's just like, oh, that's a good story. Let me use that when I need to show off my creds to the heist crew.
Yeah. I really like, I'm happy that we're talking about Skeen. The way I see Skeen is as a mirror, like a dark mirror for Cassian's character.
Yeah. What could you become? Exactly.
Yeah. Like what, and it's really interesting because like the killing of Skeen is obviously, very literal, but it's also metaphorical. It is a moment for Cassian where he's like, I don't want to become that. I'm not going to do that because, he's saying the whole time, like, oh, I'm in it here for the money. I'm a mercenary, but he's so not a mercenary. Like, yes, he does need the money. And yes, he didn't have many options in front of him, but
he could have taken more than 200,000 credits.
Totally.
Even if he didn't take the whole,
he would have earned more than 200,000 credits. Like,
yeah, he'd be like, I'm taking 400,000. We'll call that Skeen's payout as well.
Yeah.
We'll just take that. But no, because like once he shoots Skeen, well, what? The entire team is dead. Nemec just died, and Vel's there. Didn't see the conversation. Knows Skeen. Doesn't know Cassian, and there Cassian shows up having killed Skeen, and she just has to take it on his word that Skeen was the one who betrayed them. Of course, the fact that he hands back the crystal and only takes his share probably tells her, she's like, yeah, no, he could have made off with all of it. Why wouldn't he?
Yeah, he's literally armed and she's not. And they're like, it's like a doctor, a dead guy, and an unarmed, like severely exhausted and now racked with grief. It's like he has the complete upper hand and he doesn't take that. He steals the junker that's in the barn and flies off with his bit. And it's like, it's a very interesting moment. And I like that for how they set up this tension and also this bond between Skeen and Cassian as like, yes, they have similar histories, they have similar motivations, but it is also interesting that like there is a reveal that like, oh yeah, I made up the thing about my brother, but Cassian did not. Cassian did.
He's been honest.
But I mean, he didn't even tell about it, but we know that his father was killed. Like Luthen brings it up. It's, I know this about you. I know that's what happened. That's why you hate these motherfuckers.
There was something that Cassian exaggerated, though, because
when
he's talking to Luthen and he says like, yeah, I served in Minban. I was one of the 50 that made it out. And we were just fighting each other. And then Luthen's like, yeah, you were a cook and you were there 6 months and you ran. That's how you survived.
I wonder if that's part of like the lesson that Cassian has to learn, that he's like being dishonest is not the move. Like it would be better for me to simply withhold information or be honest rather than trying to spin the truth. Because that's at the beginning of this arc that he has this conversation with Luthen. And then as he goes through the heist with all these other people that he has to relate to, like he decides to, instead of elaborating or like instead of exaggerating the truth or whatever, like instead of lying, he just is like, I'm going to be tight-lipped about this, which I think is like part of the, I don't know if it's like part of like the character development exactly, but it feels significant to me that he had to make the choice to like, how do you deal with other people? Working with other people is hard, he points out. Like not much of a team player, Sheen calls him out for. So yeah, I just think that that's a really interesting point.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like, on this particular thing, it's more just like the truth of the actual experience, regardless of what anyone says. Like Andor, he has this horrible scar that was left to him it's just an undeniable, like a summary execution of someone that he loved. And like that, I think he bears that, and that like plays into the sort of idea of like where people's rebellions come from and how it orients them and how they can be oriented differently, and also how like people can take those rebellions and align them with other people if it's so necessary, and like that there's like a dynamic going on there of I mean, Nemec is like the one who we see like who's trying to figure it out. He's trying to figure out like what are the rules of play, what's the role of a mercenary, as you mentioned, what's the role of a mercenary in a rebellion. And it's like he's trying to figure out like what are the things that we can use to bring people together, what can we talk to people about to get them to think about these things. And he's doing that constantly. He's constantly probing everyone in the party with these various little things. He's very ideological, and it's interesting because the other characters don't seem like that so much, or
Nemec
aren't as
is
open
like,
about it.
he's so on the nose. Like, they gave him a red Ushanka. Like,
Yeah.
come on. Like, who he makes me think of is, if anybody's seen Fiddler on the Roof, he makes me think of Perchik, the socialist student who comes in to tutor Tevye's daughters. And I don't know. There's just something about the way that he plays him, kind of like, the earnestness, but the naivete. Because like Nemec is immediately like, when he meets Andor, he's like, he's a true believer. He's committed. I trust him. And then he finds, oh no, he's a mercenary. And then Nemec's response is, I was writing last night about how to justify my new feelings towards you.
Yeah.
So,
I really want to bounce off of DemonMama's point that you just made about like this being how like we're looking at how different people come into the same situation, kind of, and like in specific, how do people come together for a rebellion? And of course, this is something that I've been thinking a lot about because, as people who exist on the internet, who are in political spaces, who speak about these issues, we so often see that our minor differences end up being kind of expanded into these big fights, these big discourses where, people who are mostly politically aligned will end up on opposite sides of a quibble over definitions or something along those lines, right? So in this microcosm, we put these characters together and they're coming from such dramatically different backgrounds. We have like a literal ex-stormtrooper and a woman whose entire family was murdered by stormtroopers. Like, we don't know very much about Vel's background, but then like the person who is most similar to Cassian, he ends up being like ideologically on the opposite side of, on the human level of like, who are we going to screw over or not? But it is just really interesting to think about like, how do we create a unified group who can work together despite the fact that like, yes, Cinta was pissed when she found out that his name starts with a T, I think, when he revealed that he was an ex-stormtrooper. So yeah, we all have to like set aside some of our bullshit. Yeah. We all have to set aside some of our bullshit in order to work together toward a cause that is bigger than all of us. And like, what is the blueprint for doing that? There isn't really a blueprint for doing that. We just have to accept that we're going to have to work with people who we vehemently disagree with, or we have dramatically different backgrounds from, or we just are like, nothing's ever going to get done. If we just are always fighting within our own groups, like, yes, we care about some individual things that the Empire doesn't have to care about. We follow rules that the Empire does not need to follow because they get to write their own set of rules. So like, how can we come together on something fundamental, something underlying and important that's going to like fuel us into the next part of the plan or whatever?
Yeah. I think it's interesting too that this, that like, because I mean, I agree with you. There has been maybe perhaps a never ending cycle of discussing like, how do you build build a coalition or whatever you want to say. There's various iterations of that conversation. And I find it interesting that this show also explores when you can't, which is that moment with Andor and Skeen, where it's like, no, I got to kill this guy. Like, this is not going to work. This guy is like, we may have been able to pull the heist together, but we've reached the level where anything further would be a danger to everyone. Like and it's interesting to see where like a show that just sort of like bluntly lays out the just raw difficulty that there is no easy answer to figuring out like who you can work with and who you can't. And thankfully, this question is not like left in the dust in this arc. It is a continual question that this show grapples with. Is like, how do you bring people together who have different views, different backgrounds, potentially even different conclusions, and how can they be moved towards making taking the world from an intolerable state to one that's more tolerable, or perhaps moving it in the direction of a more tolerable world. I also think this is a little bit of a departure from what we've been talking about so far, but something that I think interesting that we start to see in this arc is the like social paranoia and social tension that is the downstream effect of the Empire. And we see this, like, it is like so heavy. Like, we see in the first arc, we see lots of like oppression, you know what I mean? Like, of one group to another. Mm-hmm. Yeah, overt. And in this one, we still see that. Like, we see the way that the like prefect or whatever talks about the Aldani people. But like, we start to see the like internal tension that is present in every single social interaction under this like structure of empire. The relationship between the prefect and his son and his wife, the relationship between, there's this line that the
commandant, the old guy.
Yeah, the commandant. Yeah. But like the commandant guy, there's one of the best lines in this whole arc, in my opinion, is it's like, they'll hang you for this, is that the commandant says to the I forget the guy's name, the lieutenant
Gorn.
And then Lieutenant Gorn, and he's like, after 7 years of working with you, it's the least that I would deserve.
The exact line is 7 years serving you, I deserve worse than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. And it's such a great line. And it shows like just the seething distrust and hatred and paranoia and pressure that is put on all parts. And of course, this is like, our main characters are most certainly not immune to this. They're literally in a position of going, we got to do a heist with a bunch of people. We don't know if one of us is going to sell out the other one. Everything down to like the way that the Aldani people are treated. It's all over the place. We see this depiction of just a perpetual an atmosphere. Oh yeah, and of course Deirdre's whole storyline of their internal backbiting and backstabbing and going behind each other's backs constantly.
Well, and it's interesting too that Deirdre is like lasering in on the stolen Starpath units to build in her mind like a growing rebel alliance, because like she's kind of stumbling on the correct answer from flawed premises, because Cassian isn't a rebel, not yet. He just stole it because he's a thief and he could make good money stealing it and selling it. But that's what she's locked into, and she's just like, no, there's all these pockets of random rebellion that are too random to be random. It must mean something. And she's like stumbling upon a real thing that's happening, but like her premise is from a faulty premise.
Yeah, it's amazing because it's like going around the long way to the thing that's sitting right in front of your nose. It's like, yeah, there must be, it's too random to be random. Yeah, it's the fact that you're choking the entire galaxy. And yes, there are cracks all over the place, and people are going to steal shit from you, and they're going to do shit against you. And in this particular case, you might have found a connection that was otherwise like not there, but you could throw a dart up in the air and you would hit a rebellion, exactly like Nemec said, because of course when the Empire is choking literally everyone and oppressing everyone, there's going to be rebellion everywhere. It's everything could be interpreted as an act of rebellion.
Yeah, I found her oddly compelling. Like she comes from enforcement, so she's a cop, which is why she has big cop energy, and she's not wrong. Yeah, on some level she's not wrong that there is rebel activity occurring. And so she's like, this is my gut instinct and I'm going to go with it. But yeah, I do think she's quite interesting. And I'm like, where does she fit within the whole broader thing? I guess like she's, at least at this point in the game, she's just showing us that the enforcement level, or not exactly enforcement because she's in a slightly different department now, but like where the bureaucratic process is at in a given moment. Mm-hmm. And I just want to shout out, like, honorable mention, the subtlety with which they played her boss telling her that she's in a sexist environment and that she needs to play by the rules. Oh boy, that was just really, really well executed.
Yeah, like, without saying anything, like, you know, somebody who's not clued in. The standards are different
for you and it's not fair, but yeah.
Somebody who's not clued in wouldn't even pick up that what he's talking about is sexism. Mm-hmm, I was noticing, I was like, yeah, they're deliberately avoiding any like falling down on any specific thing, because like why would the Empire openly admit that they have a sexism problem? Like
Yeah.
that,
The
fascists
lieutenant
don't do
holds
that.
to a traditional view of staffing in this department.
But that guy definitely seems like he's more interested in the practical results. He definitely seems like somebody who's like not ideologically, sexist or anything.
I'm just
like
going to call him
he's,
Captain Qyburn.
He's well, and because
I'm just brain rotting from Game of Thrones.
Where he's talking about, it's like, what do we do here? And then Deidre gives like the mission statement in the employee handbook, and he's like, that's verbatim and wrong.
Mhm.
We're healthcare providers. He has this idea of it, and when he tells her like, I know you came from enforcement, but we actually care about facts here, because he knows that cops just make shit up. So like he has a very lucid view of the Empire, that even though fascism is an irrational ideology, he still very much understands his place in it and the practicalities of how to get it done.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's amazing to hear him like literally talk about like the healthcare provider where we purge we purge the unclean. Literally, he's basically saying like, we get rid of bacteria. We are going to get rid of like infections. And it's like, oh man, like he's just says it outright like that. And it's like, yeah, it is interesting to see him just be like, I have this like very cold view. He doesn't dress it up in any of the like delusions, I guess, of the Empire. He's just like, yeah, we're getting rid of the undesirables. Like, that's our job. Our job is to find those who would resist us and ensure that they can't do that for the health of this greater body, the Empire. It's scary, and also makes him a very interesting character.
I think also something that you just said, DemonMama, a few minutes ago about like the cracks all over the galaxy. Like there's always going to be some kind of fissure that opens and like a rebellion fomenting. And it reminds me of this sort of thematic thing that I've seen pop up in a couple other, I mean, you could evoke, for the sake of our podcast listeners who've been listening for a while now, you could evoke like the, you cut off one head and two more shall take its place. But for rebellion, like you kill this person's family and now she's a part of like a heist insurgency thing, in Cinta, for example. Like you harm this person and now they're like going to double down, or like, you kill this person, but then like 8 people who liked them are going to rise up in insurgency, which is why the rebellion never truly ends. Like if you look at all of Star Wars and like how many times they've been like, this is the last of the rebellion, we're down to like fewer than 100 people or whatever. But then there is always more rebellion.
Yeah. If you make somebody lose everything, you have created somebody who has nothing to lose.
Yeah, a dangerous enemy.
That's why Hamas has more members now than it did before October 7th. Because even though, how many people have been killed in Gaza, like there was a tweet that said, like, I don't know about you, but if my entire family was killed so that they could eliminate Hamas, my first act would be to create Hamas too. So like any time, and just, to be clear, it's not like I'm supporting Hamas. I support the people of Gaza, but the idea that you can squash rebellion is like, no, that's part of the human spirit. And when you take something from somebody, they aren't going to just fully accept it. You build resentment, and resentment grows, and it reaches a tipping point. Everybody has their own rebellion.
Exactly. Every act of enforcement and every act of suppression creates enemies, and potentially lots of them. And that's like kind of the game that we see there. The Empire playing in this is like, they're like, how do we manage this? It's funny. There's another line that Cassian says where he says, oh yeah, like you're nothing to them. You're expecting that you're going up against an enemy that can change. And it's like, no, they really like their ability to adapt is limited by the fact that they're this enormous, overbearing power. Like their ability to adapt, or their ability to even see, and we see that like, that again, what we were talking about with Deirdre, like her being like incapable of seeing the thing that's right in front of her face, the obvious conclusion, which is that, yeah, you're making new rebels every day by being demented and evil, like, and cruel. And this harshness is is doing it. And she's like, nah, it's too random to be random. Like, it's gotta be a conspiracy. And it's like, well, you probably have quite a few of those. You probably got hundreds of those all over the place. Yeah, you could. Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting.
This is a little bit of a walk back to our previous 3 episodes discussion because it's just something that didn't really quite sink in until after. Because I'm sitting here like, okay, why is it still an issue that he's from Kenari? Like, why have they been keeping it a secret the entire time? And I realized that it's because the Republic, back when it was the Republic still, before the Empire, was doing collective punishment, like genocide collective punishment, war crime collective punishment on like anybody from Kenari because of this incident. So I just wanted to bring that up as I didn't say it last time because it didn't even occur to me. And like that this is the legacy that the Empire has inherited, a legacy where that was already normal. So like a lot of the actions that they take where like they're stripping resources or they've decided that Aldani is a good place to have goods coming and going, even though there isn't anything particularly resource rich on that planet.
It's a distribution hub.
It's a distribution hub. Yeah. And it makes me think that like, it reminds me of how dam building in like the United States, for example, has resulted in all of this ecological destruction. And it makes me just think that like the building of a dam is sort of a fundamentally hostile action to take because it's like the first thing that they did when they got there was build a dam and make it so that the river no longer flows to the highlands. Yeah. The sacred river. Yeah.
There's another part on that's like, this is just a small note that like is thematically relevant to that, but there's a part where they're talking about like, oh, everything that discusses the Aldani people is like so heart-wrenching, like everything from the lieutenant's like history where he's like he fell in love with an Aldani woman and then she was killed, and like to the fact it was like there's a part where they say there was like at one point it would be 15,000 people would show up to this river to see the eye, and now it's like 90 or something, I think is what they say. Or there's like 90 people, 60 people. Yeah, so 60 people. There's also a part where the commandant mentions that they built like comfort stations along the way, hotels. Like where they're literally like giving out like drugs, and they have paid the Empire has paid for alcohol, prostitutes, and various other like entertainment. They've literally subsidized a black market. First of all, that is a recognized tactic of displacement. That type of thing has been done in the past, where specifically like alcohol and drugs are used deliberately often by powers that otherwise restrict their usage. They're like clandestinely used to undermine populations that they want to have to displace or otherwise. So like this is an application of a genuinely recognized a tactic that's been recognized by genocide scholars, which I find is a very interesting commitment to what they're talking about in this show. But in this particular case, it's like its purpose is so clear and so laid out that it's like, yeah, this is we're slowly whittling away these people from everything that they knew. And then there's another line that comes shortly after that, where they're like, how are the Aldani people going to take the idea of putting a landing pad on top of their sacred temple? And it's like, well, they're not going to have much of a choice now, will they? We don't have to talk about that right now. It's like, yeah, their goal is to get it down to the smallest number of people so that nobody can fight back at all.
Well, and there was also the line I was like, I imagine they'll return to this valley when they have to build your new, airfield.
When we conscript them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that line too, which is like connected to that. Where it's
and there's also like the constant reference to the stench. And like, obviously, skins are smelly. Like, it's a part of a dead animal. It's going to have a certain smell. But like that hide that they were going to present, sure, that stinks. But that doesn't mean that like saying, these other people, they all smell. Like that is one of the most commonly used like racist tropes against the people.
Also, you're going to call them stinky and unwashed savages? You took away their fucking river.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's really strong. Like this episode really strongly depicts just like the disdain, and again, further from the first arc, like the arrogance with which the Imperials sit from their position. You know, it's like, oh yeah, I bet the Imperials smell super good with their like Coruscant chemical sprays, that like Axe body spray, but like stormtrooper
It
flavored.
reminds me of the Hunger Games. And like, if you go to the Capitol, the water smells like roses. So like everybody just smells like roses in the Capitol, but like you don't even have running water in the districts. But then the people from the Capitol want to say that you're gross. I'm doing revolutionary media all over the place right now. So I'm making connections.
No, I think that's good. Yeah, it's really blunt how and painful how much this arc like deals with like a depiction of a genocidal displacement.
Yeah, like centering indigenous experiences, and that like even it being exposed to the indigenous people can change you. And that Lieutenant
Permanently,
Gorn
yeah.
was supportive of the Empire. He was just doing his job. Like, yeah, he was like, I'm in. And then just being exposed to a person, falling in love with them, learning about their culture, like having that sense of empathy can like fundamentally undermine your ability to harm them. You know, and it's there's another character in one of the other movies who's like, all of us stormtroopers laid down our weapons at the same time. It was just this moment that we all realized we couldn't go through with it, you know, like that
From the
whether
best
it's your own
Star
people
Wars
or
movie.
not, you can't.
That's from episode 9.
Yeah, I know it's not a good episode. It's a good moment though.
I know. Yeah, sure.
I was like, yeah, I want to rewatch those. It's the worst movie.
It really is.
Oh.
I
But
screamed at it at the end. I was like,
speaking of stormtroopers, I'm noticing there's a deliberate choice to not use stormtroopers in this show.
I noticed. Yeah.
That all of the Imperials, we see their faces and we get to know them as people.
Mhm.
That even though they aren't good people, obviously, the show just doesn't treat them as faceless masks. I think the only time we don't really the pilots for the TIE fighters, they have the masks on, but like there's something dehumanizing already about air superiority anyway. So that's fine. Like it's not like, you know,
I think it's being very deliberate. Like the dehumanization is like we're drawing attention to where and when the Empire uses this tactic, you know, and where it and how it employs it, like the distance and the various types of dehumanization to create dynamics where people are more likely to see one another as expendable in one way or another.
And I think as a show too, I'm running into the same thing with Invincible sometimes, where I'm like, I'm no spoilers, but just like it's a very person-oriented show. Like even from the very first episode, the first scene is just a guy talking about his relationship with his stepson. And there's always these like, they'll insert like, okay, here's another really personal story. And this is doing the same thing. Whereas like a lot of the times in a Star Wars movie, it's really about the thing that's happening. Like it's about, let's go do this. Let's get this. Let's fight these guys. This show is much more like taking the time to flesh out like, who is the story about? Who is participating? How are we going to interact with one another in these interpersonal dynamics? And I think that is what makes for I mean, there are different types of stories. I'm not going to say that an action movie is not a good story, but it's just very compelling for me personally to be able to see, like the human dynamics of it all instead. Well, in addition to, we have a task we need to do. Here's an action scene. Let's shoot this guy or whatever. Like, but how does that impact you personally? How does killing someone change you? Like those are the kinds of things that seem like they're being explored to some degree.
Yeah, and I mean, by comparison to the others, to a lot of Star Wars media, the one big combat scene that we've seen so far has been, or I should say, there's been two, but both of them have been these really intimate and extremely tense things where it's like, oh, these are characters we just spent the last 3 episodes with, and now they're in a area, they're like in a situation of extreme tension and danger. Like the way that it approaches that versus like, you know, even original OG Star Wars trilogy, like running through a hallway shooting lasers and the guys just keep missing their lasers all over the place, and it's this more like, you know, very action serial, whereas this is like, okay, 8 people that that we've been following for 3 episodes, that we've come to know and seen them live their lives and have all these emotional conflicts and whatever. Well, one of them just got crushed by a stack of money. One of them just got shot while trying to. Well, he's like, cover me, and Skeen's like, I'll cover you, and then doesn't cover him, and then he gets shot, and it's like horrible. It's like this, just very. It's very.
I also gotta say that, like, did anybody else notice the black dudes died first?
I mostly noticed that they didn't kill the gays, but you're not wrong. I was like, the lesbians lived. Wow.
Yeah, but Cinta, she's off like on her own. How's she gonna get off? Like she didn't get on the ship with the rest of them. She's got to find her own way.
Everybody's seen her face.
And like, at least with Tamarin was his name. I'm forgetting. At least like we got to actually see him. Like Gorn gets shot, and it's a blink and you miss it bit.
Yeah, I kind of was like, what happened to him?
Like I had to actually, because I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, oh wait, where did Gorn go? Like, when it first came out, and like I had to like go back and rewatch it, and it's literally just like a split second. He's not even the focus of the shot. It's focusing on Vel, and then he gets shot and goes down, and then the camera doesn't like take a moment to like linger on him to let you know, oh yeah, Gorn's dead. No, they just like they kill him off like he's an extra. And I almost want to say that was like, I don't think that's an editing issue, other than like an editor who would be like, oh, we need these shots for reshoots or something like that, for them to identify that. But like, I suspect it was an issue of they didn't have the coverage. But that felt like I love the show overall, but that right there is like, you should probably let us know that the Imperial officer, who's the whole reason that this heist was even able to happen in the first place, you should probably spend more than half a second with him not even in focus to let us know that he just died.
Especially because he gets, so I was actually going to say earlier, like the performance from that actor, phenomenal, because they spend so many of these little lingering moments on his reactions to things, or like his delivery. And I thought that it was a very subtle performance, but that very clearly told us the message of like, yeah, I don't like the way that you're talking about these people. This is a personal, painful wound for me because I loved one of these people. And so, yeah, for him to just be like, blink and you miss it, dead. Like, I literally didn't even think about it until you just said, I'm like, I guess he did die, but like when? Barely even noticed it. The other dude, the ex-stormtrooper, gets more of a noteworthy death.
Yes.
I mean, I do think that, it definitely could have been done differently. On one hand, it's also kind of like, this guy has the least social connections to the other people that we're following. Yeah. And his path is one of extreme loneliness. He's surrounded by people that he hates. He no longer has the person that he loves. And he's decided to like basically go out by, throwing a bone to these rebels who are willing to help him get a strike back at the people who hurt him. And so on that hand, there is a certain, I guess, a way of looking at it that's like, this guy, he doesn't have anyone left to like mourn him, really. These people's only connection is that they're like, this is our guy, this is our contact who's helping make this possible, but they don't really have social connection because they're not capable of that. He's been isolated into the Imperial structure, and then that Imperial structure has stripped him of everything that he is. I mean, you mentioned like how much detail is given to it. Like, we know that he learned the entire Aldani language, which I am sure was not easy. He knows their cultural practices. Like, this guy, but he literally cannot be with these people that he speaks their language and knows their practices and loved a member of that tribe. And he can't be with them because he's an Imperial, and that's literally not possible for him. So it's like, on that hand, it is kind of unfortunate that it went that way. And, I do see where you're coming from. But also, I kind of think there is something in there of saying like, yeah, this guy has been isolated by the structure and died in this structure. And there was really no other path for him besides submit to further stripping of the self or go out like this, but isolated and alone. It's kind of sad.
Yeah. That the Imperial structure reduces you to something that can go away forever and be completely unnoticed and subsumed.
Yeah, a cog. Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of does, like, I mean, regardless of how he died, even just the way that they present his character, it depicts the empire and imperialism as a structure that is designed to just rip humanity out of people. It has no concern for people's actual human needs, their emotional needs, their social needs, the things that are more than just is there a nutrient block on the table at night. And even then we see, of course, that there's many who do not even have the nutrient blocks.
I also think that it's interesting to note that we see two different literal families in this arc. We have Mon Mothma's family and then the Commandant's family. And like observing how they treat each other and how they feel toward one another versus the kind of relationship that we see among these strangers who've been living together for 5 months. And like obviously the Commandant expresses some amount of concern, like they've got my wife and son, but it almost is like performative. Like the wife and son are like a thing that you own that is like an extension of yourself rather than like people that you care about. Because, you were not being especially kind to your wife. You were being demanding of her time. You were
She's been a
dismissive.
hostage even before she was being held hostage, she was behaving as though she's a hostage.
Yeah.
Right,
Like
exactly.
the fawning response constantly to him.
And he did not
So-
show very much care toward his son. And like, same thing with Mon Mothma's family. Her family hates her. They don't even seem, the two of them, like the dad and the daughter, like they seem like they're ideologically and personality wise maybe similar, but they don't even seem like they like each other. Versus,
I think the daughter's more of just like the rebellious
she's a teenager.
teenage
There's
daughter,
not much
but
to
also
her.
like her mom is like a known liberal senator. So how does a teenager rebel against a liberal parent? They listen to I don't know, Joe Rogan, Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
It's kind of that, and we'll see more of Mon Mothma's family life and how wonderful it is, and shouldn't we all aspire to be wealthy like that and have such a wonderful time of it?
But I was just going to say that like it shows how the imperial like structure of hierarchy extends into these like, or rather that the imperial dehumanization and disregard for people in general seems to take root inside people, so much so that they don't even behave in a caring way toward their direct related blood family members. Whereas like Nimic gets crushed by the payload and they're like Vel and Skeen is also like, it's kind of hard for me to tell how honest he's being even in these moments. Like, did he just want to drop off at the doctor's so that he could make out with the payload or what?
I suspect that's why he fought for it, but it still seemed like a genuine.
There is a genuine moment, it feels like, in that moment where at least Vel is like, and for them to be like, this kid is the reason why we're all here. Like, we care about him more than we've let on this whole time, basically. And in, trying to keep each other alive and forming relationships like Vel and Cinta becoming romantically entangled with one another, that the fundamental thing that the Empire does underneath all of it is take something quintessential away from you as a person. Like whether it's your sense of rebellion, whether it's your ability to care for other people, like it creates in you the type of person that Skeen is, someone who doesn't care about others, somebody who just wants to make out on their own. And that ultimately is the thing that we're fighting against. We're not even necessarily fighting directly against the oppression. What we're fighting against is the erosion of our ability to care for one another.
Yeah, a structure that is designed to break. It claims that it is creating like the ultimate social connection, but it must break all other ones in order to do that. You must be a part of the Empire first, and that Empire will see you as a number because that is how it maintains its power. That is what an Empire does. A body of that size and dominance can only do so by stripping and snapping and breaking every other connection that you have. You have the only one that can be there for you. You have to basically always be falling back onto the Empire and be reliant on it, or else you die. And otherwise, it can't maintain that power. And it's obviously here saying that like this doesn't work. It's not actually sustainable. You can't do this because the breaking of those very connections will undermine the structure itself.
Look at us doing like all this human analysis in addition to the literary stuff.
if this is a Star Wars, it's about glup shittos. It's about like, little thing. I mean, actually, I was just thinking like there are some glup shitto moments in this arc, and it's all in the ISB stuff where they're like referencing like, the rebellion on Kessel, which is we saw that in Solo, or
we're sending stuff to Scarif.
Scarif, which that'll be in Rogue One. I think there was even they referenced Jakku in the Hosnian
They do
system.
reference Jakku. Yeah,
so
they do.
like, that's just like ISB. It's like, okay, we need somebody to give a throwaway line. Let's pick a planet that people know so they can point and go, I know Star Wars.
We're trying to tie it into Star Wars broadly, even though we're trying to tell a different story right now.
But then,
honestly, masterful. Yeah,
they have an actual glup shitto on the show in Mon Mothma because prior to this show, she was nothing. People knew her because she said many Bothans died to get us this information in episode 6. And like Genevieve O'Reilly was cast to play Mon Mothma all the way back in episode 3, but all of her scenes were cut. Like there's one non-speaking scene of her still in that movie. But they brought her back for Rogue One, and now here it's like, okay, let's actually make her a character. Let's de-glup this shitto.
I've been hearing that name for forever, and I did not have any idea who it was until like talking to you guys. Like, that's Mon Mothma. Okay, good.
Yeah. No, it's great, but like the little bits there. It's the ISB stuff. It's like that's where we can throw in the fan service lines. There we go. That's how we make it a Star Wars.
Yeah. That's how they meet the quota. They get it all contained in one scene that's like all the Imperial stuff, and you're just like, get them out of the way, boop, boop, boop. Now we can focus on all the stuff that actually makes this show something wonderful and amazing. I mean, I have spent so much time in the Star Wars universe over the years, and I do have a genuine affinity for a lot of the Star Wars stuff. Like, I do have like it's I love the aesthetic of the way that like ships are designed in Star Wars. I've it's been with me a lot. So I'm not a total hater. I will say that Rise of Skywalker was one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And
abysmal.
Like legitimately, I can't even believe, like there are times where I think back to that movie and I go, I can't believe that actually made it to the screen.
It retroactively cancels any goodwill anybody ever extended J.J. Abrams. Like, I would have rather not have Star Trek 2009 than end up with Episode 9.
Episode 9 was it was a heap, and but
we're I in the Force, don't you know? Dumbest shit I've heard. Anyway.
Maybe we should do a talk about Rise of Skywalker at some point, because
I could listen. This podcast, I can cover all sorts of stuff, and it's not like we're only doing good stuff. Obviously, we're in a good show right now, but we just did the MCU, God. Which you famously hate. So
I famously hate the MCU. Somebody, one of my friends was like, hey, you want to watch a couple of DC things? And I literally gave them like the coldest stare. I'm like, I will never watch that. Like, I'm sorry. It is not happening. I am so done with the comic book movie crap. I have done my time. It was like asking somebody if I wanted to do a second tour in prison. I
think you'd like Penguin.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I'm sure there's some spin-off shows and stuff that I'd like, but like as for like a watch through of like core materials, it's just not happening again on that front.
I don't think so either.
I'm
I haven't seen any Wonder Womans. I haven't seen any of the Supermans or Batmans recently. I'm like, I don't care about this.
I watch it all anyway, but that's me. That's my cross to bear.
It is, yeah.
Not to spend too much time focusing on the future, but I am very much looking forward to our Star Trek arc. So, yeah,
me too.
I've been watching so much Star Trek lately.
Yeah. So does anybody have any last thoughts on this show before we wrap it up?
Not on this arc. I'm very excited for the next arc.
Oh, yes. Now, for the audience who might be watching along, we've been doing the 3-episode arcs, but since episode 7 is like in between arcs, our next episode, we're going to be doing episode 7 through 10. So 4 episodes. So if you're watching along, that's your homework. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining us. I've been Gayfesh.
I'm Moss.
And I'm DemonMama.
And we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.